Madison Clarke stepped onto the grounds of Camp Summit, Texas, with a mixture of nervousness and determination. The hot Texas sun beat down on her as she walked toward the entrance of the Military Leadership School, her new home for the next several months. Her heart raced with anticipation, though her face remained calm and composed. The fresh military uniform she wore, neatly pressed and perfectly tailored, contrasted with the deep sense of uncertainty she felt inside. She was a former combat medic, one of the rare women who had served in a frontline medical unit, saving lives in some of the most dangerous situations imaginable. But now, she was about to enter a world she had never truly been part of, the world of military command. A place where strength, discipline, and leadership were the measure of a person's worth, and Madison knew she would have to prove herself over and over again. Despite her extensive background, Madison knew she was walking into a world where her past meant little. She wasn't here as a medic anymore, she was here to become something entirely new. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. The men and women who greeted her in the barracks didn't seem to share her experience or her background. They were hardened soldiers, hardened by combat and intense training, with an air of superiority that made Madison feel small. Among them was Lieutenant Ryan Mitchell. He was a tall, broad-shouldered officer with a kind of arrogance that only someone born into a world of privilege could possess. From the moment he laid eyes on Madison, he looked down on her, dismissing her as just another transfer who didn't belong in their ranks. "You're just a nurse, aren't you?" Ryan sneered during their first encounter. His voice carried a condescending tone, and his smirk made it clear that he was already making judgments about her. "What makes you think you belong here?" Madison remained silent, letting his words roll off her. She was used to being underestimated, to being judged based on things other than her ability to lead. But this was different. Here, she would have to prove her worth, and she knew it wouldn't be easy. As the days passed, Madison kept to herself, focusing on the grueling exercises and tests that came with being a part of the program. Her classmates would sometimes glance her way, whispering behind her back, but she didn't let it bother her. She had a mission here, and she would not let anyone distract her from it. The physical tests were brutal. Running, push-ups, obstacle courses, timed sprints, they all seemed designed to break you down. Madison pushed through it all, determined to hold her ground. Yet, with each passing day, Ryan's mockery only grew more persistent. "You still don't know how to hold a rifle properly," he would say, his laughter echoing through the barracks. "I'm not sure you're cut out for this." Madison didn't retaliate. She simply kept her head down, doing what was required. But there was a fire building inside of her, a fire that would not be extinguished so easily. One evening, after another long day of training, Madison was alone in the locker room, changing out of her uniform. As she reached up to hang her shirt on the rack, something fell from the shelf, landing softly at her feet. She looked down to see an old worn-out patch lying on the floor. The patch, barely visible under layers of dust, was stitched with the words "Black Raven." Madison's heart skipped a beat as she picked it up, recognizing it immediately. This was not just any patch, it was the emblem of a special unit, one she had once led. It was a past that she had buried long ago, a secret she had kept hidden from everyone at Camp Summit. The patch had been a part of her identity, a symbol of her leadership and her survival in some of the most dangerous missions imaginable. Yet, no one here knew the true significance of it. No one knew who Madison Clarke really was. As Madison stood there, holding the patch in her hands, a voice broke the silence. "Hey, what's that?" It was Caitlin Turner, one of the cadets from her unit. Caitlin, a young woman with a sharp mind and an inquisitive nature, had apparently seen the patch fall. Her curiosity piqued. Caitlin bent down to pick it up. Madison froze, unsure of how to react. She hadn't expected anyone to notice, let alone ask questions. Caitlin stared at the patch for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she read the faded words stitched into it. There was something in Caitlin's gaze, something that told Madison she wasn't the only one with secrets. Without saying another word, Caitlin pocketed the patch and walked away, leaving Madison standing there, her heart pounding in her chest. The last thing Madison needed was for someone to dig into her past. But the questions were already starting, and Madison wasn't sure how long she could keep her history hidden. The next few days were a blur of training exercises, physical drills, and tests, but Madison couldn't stop thinking about the patch and what it might mean. She could sense Caitlin's curiosity, and deep down, she knew the young cadet wouldn't stop until she had answers. Little did Madison know, Her past was about to come crashing back into her life in a way she never expected. But for now, she kept her head down, pushing forward, doing what was asked of her. No one knew who Madison Clarke really was, and she intended to keep it that way. But the storm was coming. And when it arrived, it would shake everything Madison thought she knew about herself. The days at Camp Summit grew more intense with each passing week. Madison continued to endure the relentless training, keeping her focus sharp and her demeanor unwavering. Each day she pushed herself harder, determined to prove her worth to everyone, especially to Ryan Mitchell, who seemed to take every opportunity to remind her of her supposed inadequacy. Yet, despite all the harsh words and the physical demands, Madison remained silent. She refused to let them break her. She knew that her true test had nothing to do with the drills or the physical challenges. It had everything to do with what lay hidden beneath her calm exterior, her strength, her leadership, and the courage she had honed during her time in the field. But as the days stretched into weeks, something unexpected happened. Madison's focus began to shift. It started with a strange sensation, an eerie feeling that she was being watched. The thought lingered in the back of her mind, but she quickly dismissed it. She had no reason to believe anyone was watching her, especially not after everything she'd been through. One night, as the cadets finished their nightly debriefing and prepared for bed, Madison was alone in the briefing room. She sat at the back, her head resting on her hands as she reflected on the training and what it meant for her future. She'd come so far already, but she still felt like she was on the outside looking in. Suddenly, the silence in the room was broken by a soft ping, the sound of a computer coming to life. Madison lifted her head, her brow furrowing as she glanced around. The other cadets had long since retreated to their barracks, and the building seemed deserted. Yet, the computer in the corner of the room was now illuminated. Curious, Madison stood up and walked over to the machine. She leaned in, tapping the keyboard to wake the screen. What she saw made her heart race. On the screen, in bold, flashing letters, was a message that sent a chill down her spine. Black Raven, ready for deployment. Madison's breath caught in her throat. The message was unmistakable. It was a code, one she knew all too well. It was the same code she had received during her time as a leader in the special unit. But why was it here? Why was someone sending this message to her now? Her mind raced, trying to make sense of it all. Had someone discovered her past? Was she being called back into action? Her pulse quickened as 1,000 questions swirled in her head. She had left that life behind. She had walked away from the mission, from the danger, from the dark secrets of her past. But now, it seemed like her past was coming to find her. Madison stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The message had no sender. It was just a flash of words that seemed to hang in the air, heavy with meaning. She thought about ignoring it, walking away, pretending it hadn't happened. But something inside her urged her to stay, to dig deeper, to find out who was behind the message. As she stared at the words on the screen, the door to the briefing room creaked open. Madison turned, her heart leaping in her chest as she saw a figure step inside. It was Caitlin Turner, the young cadet who had found the patch weeks earlier. Madison. Caitlin's voice was soft, but there was an urgency in it. "I need to talk to you." Madison quickly closed the computer, her pulse still racing. She had no idea what Caitlin had seen or heard, but she knew it was something important. "I saw the patch," Caitlin continued, her eyes locking onto Madison's with a mixture of curiosity and determination. "And I've been digging into it. I found something." Madison's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected Caitlin to be so bold, to dig so deep. But there was something about the younger woman that made her want to trust her. "What did you find?" Madison asked, keeping her voice steady despite the rising tension in the room. Caitlin hesitated for a moment, as if weighing her words carefully. Then, she stepped forward, lowering her voice. "I found a message. A coded message. And it's connected to you, isn't it? To your past." Madison felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She knew the message Caitlin was talking about. The same one she had just received. The same one that called her back to the life she had tried to leave behind. "I don't know what you're talking about," Madison said, trying to mask the fear and uncertainty creeping into her voice. But Caitlin wasn't buying it. "Don't lie to me," Caitlin said, her voice firm now. "I know it's you. The Black Raven. And I know you're not just some medic. You've been hiding something. I need to know what it is. Madison stared at Caitlin for a long moment, her mind spinning. She knew she couldn't keep the truth hidden forever. But could she trust Caitlin with it? Would telling her be the right choice? Before Madison could answer, the door to the briefing room slammed open, and a loud voice echoed through the hall. It was Colonel Jack Harrison. "Clarke," he called out, his tone commanding. "We need to talk." Madison froze. She hadn't seen him in months, not since her transfer to the leadership program. The last time she had heard from him, he had been one of her commanding officers. The man who had given her orders, the man who had trusted her with some of the most dangerous missions of her career. Caitlin looked between Madison and the door, sensing the shift in the air. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Madison shook her head, her instincts kicking in. "I don't know. But I have a feeling we're about to find out." With a final glance at Caitlin, Madison walked toward the door, her mind racing with questions. Who else knew about her past? Why had Colonel Harrison come for her now? The answers were just around the corner, and Madison Clarke wasn't about to back down. Madison walked toward the door, her heart pounding in her chest as she heard the footsteps of Colonel Jack Harrison echoing in the hallway. The colonel's presence in the camp was not something to be taken lightly. His reputation preceded him, a man of unwavering discipline and authority, a man who had been part of her life in a way no one else at Camp Summit could ever understand. When Madison stepped into the hall, she found herself face to face with Colonel Harrison, standing tall and imposing in his military uniform, his medals glinting in the dim light. His cold eyes scanned her for a moment, but there was something different in them now, something that made Madison uneasy. "You're Clarke, right?" The colonel's voice was sharp, but not unkind. There was a sense of purpose behind his words, a gravity that Madison couldn't ignore. "Yes, sir," she replied, standing at attention, though her mind raced with questions. What was this about? Why had he come for her now, of all times? Colonel Harrison gave her a brief nod, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk, Madison. It's time to address your situation." Madison felt a cold sweat on her palms. She had hoped that her past would remain buried, hidden away from the prying eyes of those who had no right to know. But here it was, surfacing in the form of this man who had once been her superior. The man who knew everything about her. Or so she thought. "I don't know what you mean, sir," Madison said, keeping her voice steady as she stared him down. She had learned the art of controlling her emotions in the most intense of situations, and she wasn't about to lose her composure now. Colonel Harrison's lips tightened into a thin line. "You know exactly what I mean, Madison. This isn't just about leadership training. This is about your past. Your real past." The colonel paused, watching her closely as if waiting for her to crack. Madison stood tall, her mind spinning as she tried to make sense of what was happening. Had someone found out about her unit? Was Caitlin's discovery of the patch just the beginning? "I think you know why I'm here," the colonel continued, his voice low and deliberate. "You've been hiding something. And it's time for you to come clean, because your past is about to catch up with you." Madison's breath caught in her throat. She could feel her heart racing in her chest as the walls seemed to close in around her. She had worked so hard to leave that life behind, to walk away from the darkness, the bloodshed, the constant fear. But now, it seemed that all of it was coming back to find her. Caitlin, who had been standing in the doorway, stepped forward hesitantly. Her curiosity was written all over her face, but she also knew there was something important happening here. Madison glanced at her for a moment, then turned her attention back to Colonel Harrison. "I don't know what you think you know, sir," Madison said, her voice cool but firm. "But I left that life behind. I'm here to do my job, to become a leader. Nothing more." Colonel Harrison studied her for a long moment, as if weighing her words carefully. Then, without another word, he stepped aside, motioning for Madison to follow him down the hallway. There was no room for negotiation in his command. "I'm not here to argue with you," he said quietly as they walked. "But you need to understand something. You're not just a cadet at this camp. You're much more than that." Madison's curiosity piqued, but she kept her voice steady. "What do you mean?" Colonel Harrison's gaze hardened. "You don't just lead from the front, Madison. You lead by example. You've proven that in your past, and now you need to prove it here. But first, we need to have a conversation about what's really going on." They arrived at a small nondescript room at the end of the hall. Colonel Harrison opened the door and gestured for Madison to step inside. Once inside, the room was dimly lit, filled with military maps and old equipment. But Madison's eyes quickly fell on the computer sitting on a desk in the corner of the room, the same one that had displayed the message earlier. "You've already seen it, haven't you?" the colonel asked, his voice grim. "The message?" Madison nodded slowly. "I don't understand, sir. Who sent that?" Colonel Harrison leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "The message wasn't from us. It wasn't from your unit. It wasn't even from anyone in the military, you know." Madison's eyes widened. "Then who?" "Someone from your past," Colonel Harrison interrupted. "Someone who knows what you did. Someone who knows who you really are." The weight of his words hung heavily in the room. Madison felt her stomach drop. She had worked so hard to bury her past, but now it seemed that it had come roaring back into her life, threatening everything she had worked for. "Why are you telling me this now?" Madison asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why now?" "Because," the colonel said, his voice dark and serious, "it's time for you to step up. They're watching you. They know you're here. And they won't stop until they get what they want." Madison felt her pulse quicken. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. It wasn't just her future on the line anymore, it was her life. Before she could say anything more, the colonel turned away, reaching for a folder on the desk. "You'll need to prepare yourself," he said. "This is just the beginning." Madison stood in stunned silence, her mind racing as the implications of his words sank in. She had thought that leaving her past behind would protect her, but now she understood the truth. There was no escaping it. Her past would always follow her, and now it was up to her to decide how to face it. "Get some rest," Colonel Harrison added, his tone softening just slightly. "Tomorrow we begin." As Madison left the room, her thoughts swirled in confusion and fear. She wasn't just fighting to be a leader anymore. She was fighting to survive. The following morning, Madison awoke with a sense of unease settling in her chest. The conversations from the night before played over and over in her mind. Colonel Harrison's cryptic words echoed in her ears, "Someone from your past. They won't stop until they get what they want." She had always been good at compartmentalizing, pushing thoughts of her past deep into the recesses of her mind. But now, with the looming presence of Colonel Harrison's warnings and the mysterious message she had received, there was no denying that the past was no longer something she could hide from. She stood up, shaking off the fog of confusion that still clouded her thoughts. The sound of heavy boots echoed down the hallway as other cadets prepared for the day's training. Madison grabbed her uniform, pulled it on, and marched toward the mess hall. As she entered, the usual chatter of cadets filled the air, but something felt different today. The atmosphere was thicker, charged with an unspoken tension. It wasn't just the usual grueling routine of training and tests. There was something more, something Madison couldn't quite place. Her eyes scanned the room and landed on Ryan Mitchell, sitting at his usual spot, surrounded by a group of cadets who were laughing and joking. He hadn't spared her a second glance since Colonel Harrison had called her into the briefing room. But today, there was something strange in the way he looked at her. It wasn't the usual mockery. No, this was different. Madison could feel the weight of his gaze, and though she refused to acknowledge it, she felt the creeping sensation of eyes on her. She turned away quickly and took her seat at the far end of the table, trying to push the thoughts from her mind. As the cadets finished their meal, the mess hall doors suddenly swung open, and Colonel Harrison stepped into the room. The atmosphere shifted immediately. His mere presence commanded attention. He was dressed in full military regalia, the gleam of his medals making the air feel colder. His sharp eyes scanned the room, and it didn't take long before his gaze fell on Madison. "Clarke," he said, his voice booming across the hall. "Come with me." Madison's heart skipped a beat. She stood up without hesitation, the rest of the room falling into a tense silence as she walked past the other cadets. Ryan's gaze followed her, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Colonel Harrison led her out of the mess hall and down a narrow corridor, the sound of their footsteps echoing off the walls. When they reached a door at the end of the hallway, the colonel paused and turned to face her. "You've been given a task," he said, his tone low and serious. "A task that requires more than just leadership. It requires someone who understands the stakes. Someone who has seen the darkest parts of this world and survived." Madison raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, sir?" The colonel didn't answer immediately. Instead, he motioned for her to step inside. As she walked into the room, her eyes immediately fell on a large table covered with maps, intelligence reports, and images of what seemed to be classified operations. At the center of the table was a large screen, showing a series of images and video clips from a mission that was clearly marked as top secret. Madison's mind raced as she scanned the information. The mission details were vague, but she could make out enough to see that it was a high-risk operation involving special forces, the kind of mission she had led years ago. Her heart raced. "I don't understand," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "What's this got to do with me?" Colonel Harrison took a step closer, his eyes locking onto hers. "You think you left this life behind. You think you can walk away from who you were. But the truth is, Madison, they won't let you. You're too valuable to them. Too dangerous." Madison felt the ground shift beneath her. The weight of the colonel's words settled deep within her chest, pressing the air from her lungs. Her past was never truly gone, was it? "You're being watched," Colonel Harrison continued. "Someone or something is looking for you. They've been searching for you since the moment you left. And now, they've come to collect." Madison shook her head, disbelief clouding her mind. "I didn't do anything wrong. I've been out of that world for years. I left it all behind." The colonel's expression softened, but there was no mistaking the gravity of his words. "You think you can hide from the past, but the past is always watching. It's waiting for you to slip up. And when you do, they'll be there, ready to take everything from you." Madison's pulse quickened. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. The world she had tried so hard to leave behind was closing in on her once again. But this time, it wasn't just about survival. It was about something more, something darker. And as the weight of Colonel Harrison's words settled in her chest, Madison realized that she had a choice to make. She could run. She could retreat into the shadows and pretend none of this was happening. Or she could face it, head on, and fight for everything she had worked for. But there was no time to waste. Colonel Harrison was already moving toward the door, his face set with determination. "Get prepared," he said, his voice low and commanding. "This is just the beginning." The day passed in a blur of activity, each moment filled with the weight of what had just been revealed. Madison tried to focus on the training exercises, but the colonel's words echoed in her mind, drowning out everything else. "They're watching you." The reminder that her past wasn't truly behind her filled her with unease. Every glance from a fellow cadet, every conversation, felt like it could be an attempt to uncover her secrets. By the time evening rolled around, Madison was exhausted. But the physical fatigue couldn't quell the storm in her mind. She paced around her barracks, her thoughts racing. The message on the screen. The patch. Colonel Harrison's warning. Everything seemed to be leading her back to something she had desperately tried to escape. She could feel the weight of the choices before her. She could retreat. Disappear again, like she had before, pretending the past never happened. But part of her, the part that had survived all those years in the field, knew that retreating wasn't an option. It was as if she had been pulled into something far larger than herself. Something that would stop at nothing to drag her back into the shadows. And whatever it wasn't going away. The sound of boots approaching the door brought Madison back to the present. Her pulse quickened as she glanced toward the entrance. A knock sounded, and before she could respond, the door opened slowly. It was Ryan Mitchell. His face was unreadable, and there was something in his eyes, something that had shifted since the last time they'd crossed paths. The usual smugness was gone, replaced with an odd mix of curiosity and something else, something that Madison couldn't quite place. "Clarke," he said, his voice firm but not mocking. "We need to talk." Madison stood, unsure of what to expect. She had never imagined Ryan would seek her out. After everything that had happened between them, this felt like the last conversation she wanted to have. But there was a certain gravity in his tone, a sense of urgency that made her hesitate. "About what?" she asked cautiously, crossing her arms over her chest. Ryan stepped inside the room, closing the door behind him. "I know what's going on," he said, his voice lower now, almost conspiratorial. "And I don't know if you want to hear this, but I'm in it now too." Madison's heart skipped a beat. In it too. She took a step back, trying to process his words. The tension in the room was palpable, and Madison's mind immediately went to the worst-case scenario. Was Ryan working with them? Was he trying to manipulate her? "What do you mean by in it?" she asked, her voice colder than she intended. Ryan ran a hand through his short-cropped hair, a sign of the frustration that seemed to be building inside him. "You're not the only one who's been getting messages. I don't know who they are, but they've been monitoring all of us. Ever since we got here. But they want you, Clarke. They want you more than anyone else." Madison's stomach tightened as the weight of his words hit her. She had suspected that her past had come back to haunt her, but hearing Ryan say it out loud made everything feel too real. Too close. "Why are you telling me this now?" Madison asked, her voice barely a whisper. "After everything you've said, you want to help me now?" Ryan hesitated, and Madison could see the struggle in his eyes. The same struggle that had plagued her for years, the conflict between doing the right thing and following orders. Between standing firm and succumbing to pressure. "I don't know why," Ryan admitted, his voice softer now. "But I can see it. I can see that you're not just some medic. You're not just here to follow orders. There's more to you than what we've been led to believe. And I don't want to be a part of whatever's going on, but I know I have to be. I can't sit back and let them do this." Madison stood in stunned silence, her thoughts spinning. She had always assumed Ryan was just another arrogant officer, someone who thought he had all the answers. But the look in his eyes now told her something different. This wasn't about rivalry anymore. This wasn't about proving who was better. This was something much bigger. "You want to help?" Madison finally asked, her voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "Why should I trust you?" Ryan's gaze hardened. "Because right now, we're on the same side whether we like it or not. Whatever's coming, it's coming for all of us. And if you don't do something about it, it won't just be your past that gets destroyed, it'll be all of ours." The room fell silent. Madison felt the weight of his words pressing down on her, suffocating her. He was right. She could try to fight this on her own, but the reality was, she couldn't do it alone. If she wanted to survive this, she would need to rely on the people around her, even if that meant trusting someone like Ryan Mitchell. "Fine," Madison said, her voice low. "But this doesn't mean I trust you completely." Ryan nodded, his expression unreadable. "I wouldn't expect you to. But we need to move fast. Time's running out." With that, he turned and left the room, leaving Madison standing there, her mind racing. She knew what she had to do now. The past had come calling, and she couldn't ignore it any longer. The choices she made in the coming days would define not just her future, but the future of everyone around her. Colonel Harrison had been right. She was being watched. And soon, she would have to face whatever was waiting for her, head-on. The next day, Madison woke early, the weight of the previous night's conversation heavy on her mind. The looming sense of impending danger had settled like a dark cloud, and no matter how much she tried to ignore it, she couldn't escape the truth. The past she had worked so hard to bury had finally caught up with her. The morning was unusually quiet, the camp almost eerily still. It was as if everyone knew something was about to happen, but no one dared to speak it out loud. Madison moved through the camp with a focused determination, her every step measured and deliberate. She could feel the eyes of her fellow cadets on her as she passed, their whispers and sideways glances a constant reminder that something was off. As she approached the briefing room, she spotted Ryan standing near the entrance, his face grim. His posture was tense, as if he too could feel the approaching storm. Madison nodded at him but said nothing, and they both entered the room together. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Colonel Harrison stood at the front, flanked by a few other high-ranking officers. The rest of the cadets were assembled, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. Everyone knew something big was about to happen, but no one knew exactly what. "Clarke," Colonel Harrison called, his voice cutting through the hushed murmurs of the room. "Mitchell. Step forward." Madison and Ryan moved to the front of the room, their every move scrutinized by the rest of the cadets. It was a silent declaration. The two of them were about to become more than just cadets. They were about to be thrown into something much bigger than training, something that would test every ounce of their resolve. Colonel Harrison's gaze flicked between the two of them before he began. "What I'm about to tell you will change everything. This isn't just about leadership training anymore. This is about survival." He paused, letting the words hang in the air like a weight that no one could escape. The silence was palpable, and Madison felt her pulse quicken in anticipation. "You are both now part of a covert operation," Colonel Harrison continued. "We've been monitoring certain individuals for some time now. People from your past, Madison. And they've just made their move. We have a window of opportunity, but we need to act fast." Madison's mind raced as the implications of the colonel's words sank in. She had known this day would come, but she hadn't expected it to hit so suddenly. The danger she had hoped to escape was now right at her doorstep, and she couldn't run from it anymore. "We've received intelligence about a group," Colonel Harrison went on. "A rogue faction. They've been tracking you, Madison. They know who you are and what you've done. And they've come to collect." Ryan's face turned pale at the mention of this faction. Madison could see the tension in his shoulders as he processed the information. This wasn't just about a mission anymore. This was personal for both of them. "I'm assigning you two to lead a reconnaissance mission," Colonel Harrison said, his voice steady. "You'll be working alongside a select team. Your objective is to gather intelligence on this rogue faction, determine their location, and report back. You'll be operating under the radar. No one can know what we're doing." Madison felt a chill crawl up her spine. This wasn't just another mission. This was a fight for survival, for everything she had left. The stakes were higher than ever, and she could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. If she failed, there would be no second chances. Ryan spoke up, his voice steady but filled with concern. "And if we don't find them in time?" Colonel Harrison's gaze hardened. "Then we deal with the consequences. This is bigger than you or me. These people have the power to bring everything down. They're after more than just Madison. They're after something far more dangerous." The colonel's words echoed in the room, the tension growing thick with every passing second. Madison glanced at Ryan, their eyes locking for a brief moment. There was no turning back now. This mission was the beginning of something much darker, something that would test them both in ways they never imagined. "Prepare yourselves," Colonel Harrison said, his voice final. "You leave at dawn." With that, he turned and walked out of the room, leaving Madison and Ryan standing in the silence. The weight of what was to come hung in the air, and Madison could feel the gravity of the situation pulling her down. She looked at Ryan, who was already turning to leave. "We'll make it through this," she said, more to herself than to him. She had to believe that. Ryan paused, his back still turned. "I don't know about that, but we're in this together now. Whatever happens, we face it head-on." As they walked out of the room together, Madison's mind raced with 1,000 thoughts. Her past was back, and she couldn't hide from it anymore. But she had made her choice. She would face whatever came next, with or without the support of those around her. The mission was set. The clock was ticking. And Madison Clarke wasn't going down without a fight.